And a good day to you, Jerry Usher, Debbie Georgianni. It is Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. One thing that a lot of people are talking about these days is it's known by an acronym, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And we hear a lot about that, of course, with soldiers coming back from combat deployments back home, and then they have anxiety issues and depression, and tragically, we're hearing about so many, the increase of suicides among soldiers. But, Debbie, PTSD is something that can impact anybody in any circumstance in their lives, and that's what we want to have a conversation about today.
Absolutely, and it can be short-term or situational or chronic, and it's vitally important that we understand what it is so we can support one another, help one another, and encourage one another to thrive. And this is a great conversation, dear listeners. We want you to partake in it, but we really need you to stay tuned in because we really feel that after this just shy of an hour, you'll walk away with a better understanding of this issue that is really plaguing the majority of us. 1-800-585-9396. That's the number to dial to be on the show today. We need to hear from you. Remember, you drive the conversation. 1-800-585-9396.
If you find that you struggle a lot with anxiety or depression, or maybe you are consciously aware of some kind of traumatic experience that you had in your life, you were abused or violated in some way, and you just can't seem to move beyond that, we have actually an expert who's going to join us here in just a moment. But feel free to give us a call. It's 1-800-585-9396. Maybe you know somebody in your life that you care for and you want to try to help them, but you're not really sure what to do. Or again, as we talked about, military. If you've served in the military and been in traumatic combat situations or even non-combat situations, let's have a conversation about this. 1-800-585-9396.
I was sharing with our guest, Jerry, right before the show that I really feel that I went through a short-term PTSD situation with my divorce and my post-divorce constant, I believe it was almost 2 years in the courts, and it was horrific. I was in a constant fight or flight mode, and I had several doctors tell me, I think you might be suffering from a form of PTSD because I was just not coping well with it. It's interesting how the body will not respond the way you normally expect it to. You're in this like altered state, if you will. It's very strange. And I was sharing it with our guest, and he had confirmed what I was experiencing. And that makes you feel like you're not alone when you have somebody say, yeah, that is what you went through. It really does help to know you're not going crazy. I mean, it's because when things change in your body, no matter what it is, sometimes you feel like, oh, is this only happening to me and no one else? And so that's why this conversation is so vital today, dear listeners. Please partake in it. There's an open phone line just for you at 1-800-585-9396.
And our guest today is Dr. Edward Tick. He is Executive Director and co-founder of Soldier's Heart. He's also a Soldier's Heart program leader. He's honored for his groundbreaking work in the spiritual, holistic, and community-based healing of veterans and post-traumatic stress disorder. He's been a psychotherapist for 38 years, specializing mainly working with veterans, but we're going to broaden the conversation out as we mentioned. Dr. Tick, welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jerry and Debbie, for having me and for introducing this very important topic to your large and caring audience. Very important that we're all talking about this together and that we do realize how common, how universal traumatic experience is.
Well, and on that note, Ed, if you would just kind of lay the groundwork for our listeners here. We're talking about what? Debbie mentioned she went through a divorce. My parents were divorced. I have no doubt that created trauma and stresses in my life, but we're talking about any forms of abuse, life-threatening situations. Just what exactly are we talking about here with post-traumatic stress disorder?
Well, let's go back to the origins. We know that what we call post-traumatic stress disorder today has been around literally for thousands of years, and it is rampant in the spiritual literature of the world. We find what we call PTSD in ancient Greek writings, in ancient Roman writings. The indigenous cultures of the world knew it. Of course, they had different names, but they knew it. And it's in the Bible. It's everywhere. Noah, King David, King Saul, Job were all massive trauma sufferers. And if we read the Bible stories carefully, we see that they broke down in ancient times the same way people break down today. So we can talk more about that. It would even be worthwhile doing a whole show on trauma in the Bible someday.
That would be fascinating.
So we can do that in the future if we like.
Yes.
For today, in introducing this whole topic of trauma and its universality in humanity and also in the animal world, the word trauma is actually an ancient Greek word, and in ancient Greece it meant when anybody was wounded by a projectile, by a spear or a sword or a knife. If you're stabbed by a knife or a sword, you're traumatized. So it was being stabbed violently. However, the ancient people, and all of the spiritual traditions teach us this, and religious traditions, they didn't separate body, mind, heart, spirit the way we do today and say something is just of the body. But the experience was whole. So when the word trauma was used in ancient times, it was about being penetrated in our hearts and our souls as well as our bodies by the violence of the world. So trauma is any time, any violent actions, and they don't have to be physical, so physical, emotional, spiritual, mental violence, any time any violence is done to us and penetrates us in a significant way, causing inner changes, we are traumatized. When we understand that, we understand that there is a huge range of human experiences, from accidents, car accidents, industrial accidents, as you all shared, family situations, untimely deaths, illnesses, separations and divorces, certainly substance abuse, and certainly domestic violence and street violence, being mugged, being raped or sexually abused. All of these are traumatizing events, and they can all cause the breakdown that today we call PTSD.
Dr. Edward Tick is with us on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. If you'd like to jump in and ask him a question or talk about this conversation about PTSD, please call in right now. There is an open phone line, 1-800-585-9396. That's the number to dial. And you can get on the show today and talk to Dr. Ed Tick. Dr. Ed, real quickly, before you continue on with the foundational aspects of PTSD, question for you about this. When we label things, when we label issues or illnesses or things that we're dealing with, and we put a name to it like PTSD, why is it that all of a sudden society starts to back away, the culture starts to back away and say, oh, well, that person's got a problem, or there's a stigma attached to it, or why is that? It's so frustrating. I've seen it done. I saw it done about 2 months ago in the airport. There was a gentleman walking through with a trained dog, and he was obviously served in the military. He had some military memorabilia on his T-shirt, and his wife said was at the ticket counter, and when she walked away, the ticket agent said to the next few people, which was I was one of them in line, said, "Oh, that person has PTSD." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, why are we doing this as a culture? Do we make it worse?"
Yes, we do make it worse in many ways, and let's talk about why we're doing it. Whenever we give something a label, we separate the labeled person from the rest of us, as if they were different and as if they have something that we don't have. They're carrying something, or they've got germs or a condition, whatever it is. The fact that we label and diagnose is supposed to be to help us. Of course, if we have cancer, we want to name it and we want to get the right kind of help. So when we label mental health issues, the goal is ideally the same. Give something a medical or scientific diagnosis, and it will refer us to the right practitioners. However, it's not always accurate, and it does alienate and scare people. So it's very important that all of our listeners understand this. Post-traumatic stress disorder is not a mental illness. It's not. It is included in the psychiatric manual. It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and PTSD is listed there. And most people are referred to psychiatrists and psychologists as if they had a mental illness, and their families think so. That's inaccurate. People are afraid. After the Vietnam War, there were so many veterans in terrible distress, and the country was, we all remember, was turning against the veterans and blaming them for the unpopular war and trashing them. So they got PTSD not only from the war, but also from the way they were treated upon homecoming, and the public got really frightened of them and frightened when the diagnosis PTSD was created in 1980. And so now the public has a knee-jerk reaction of, oh my God, veterans are dangerous, and if they've got PTSD, they might explode and hurt me. So a lot of our veterans today walk around with T-shirts that say, for example, this combat veteran is medicated for your protection. Now, the veterans are sarcastic about that. They don't want to be isolated. They don't want to be alienated, and they're really they're not scary, dangerous people. They're beautiful people who have given everything and sacrificed for us. The public is frightened of the diagnosis, frightened of mental health issues, doesn't know how to respond. Our country is illiterate about military issues and about the realities of military service and war and combat. And so when I'm in the airport and see a veteran or a service dog, I go up to them and welcome them home and try to make conversation, but I also watch most people walking away. They walk away from me when I got my military T-shirts and hats on, too. And I'm not even a veteran, but I'm seeing and feeling that sense of fear and separation. We really have to embrace that we are all human together, that people with traumatic wounds are wounded brothers and sisters who are not scary and they're not going to hurt us, and we make it worse when we walk away and isolate. They know, they see, they feel it. One veteran I work with says, please don't practice drive-by caring. Let me know you care, but you'd better be willing to sit down and have a cup of coffee with me and talk to me for an hour if you ask me how I am today, because it's really hard to live in my skin. They're asking for help. The public doesn't know what to do and is frightened of them, and it's an artificial condition that we all have to overcome together.
Well, that's why we are addressing this topic today on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. We want to hear from you, dear listeners. Again, we made the point that we hear a lot about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and its related I guess manifestations, if I can put it that way, mainly related to veterans of combat and military and so forth. If that is you, call in right now and share your experience and let us know that you what you are experiencing about this, and also, but we want to broaden this out, as we said before, that we can be traumatized, as Dr. Tick mentioned, wounded, have that spear through our hearts, our souls, our emotions, our psyches, basically because of anything that we experience. So if you have had a traumatic experience in your life that is causing you can't quite move beyond that and thrive in life, maybe you're just kind of white-knuckling it right now, give us a call. Let's talk about it at 1-800-585-9396. Take a short break right now, then we do have a lot of calls that we're going to get to, but there is a line open for you right now, 1-800-585-9396. Our guest is Dr. Edward Tick. He is Executive Director and co-founder of Soldier's Heart. He has been a psychotherapist for 38 years and working with veterans since the 1970s. So you've got a great opportunity. Please join us right now on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie.
Why did millions of people tune in each week to listen to Mother Angelica on her live television program? Because she had the answers. Whatever the question, problem, or heartbreaking sorrow, guided by the Holy Spirit and directed by the teachings of the Church, Mother Angelica had straightforward solutions to life's puzzling problems. Mother Angelica's Answers, Not Promises, a profoundly practical, humorous, and common-sense collection. Available now at EWTNRC.com.
Anna Mitchell here, inviting you to join me each weekday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time for the Sunrise Morning Show on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. You'll hear compelling interviews with interesting Catholics from around the country and the world, news from the Catholic perspective, plus reflections on the daily Mass readings, and much more. Weekday mornings, 6 a.m. Eastern.
The Sunrise Morning Show. A better way to start your day.
This is Bishop Paul Bradley of the Diocese of Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Hi, this is Tim Staples from Catholic Answers Live.
This is Father John Ricardo. Thanks for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Thanks, you guys, for listening to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie on EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. We're talking about PTSD today. And if you're not sure what PTSD means, it's post-traumatic stress disorder. And we have an expert with us, Dr. Ed Tick. And phone lines are jamming up. But as soon as an open phone line comes available, please mention that, please call in and you can get on the show, 1-800-585-9396. Jerry, you wanted me to mention something, I should say. I couldn't walk and talk and read at the same time.
I just was going to say, we obviously can't get too deep in anybody's situation here, and we're not, we don't do therapy on the air, but
right.
We can certainly get into a discussion about your situation. So let's start with Debbie in Scranton, Pennsylvania, listening to EWTN Radio on JMJ Radio. Hi, Debbie. You're on with Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and our guest, Dr. Edward Tick. How are you, Debbie?
Hello, Dr. Ed. I would like to know if you are familiar with any Catholic resources for survivors of spousal rape. I've looked around and I haven't come across anything yet. In fact, next week is the anniversary of my escaping my husband. And those kind of things tend to trigger my anxiety. And I was wondering if you have any resources you could recommend.
Well, thank you for calling in, for sharing that, Debbie. And I also want to immediately honor your courage in speaking out and naming the wound and the suffering you had, for our entire audience. So you're already modeling some of the healing. Storytelling to a caring, compassionate public is absolutely critical. And we all have the fantasy that we have to keep these terrible stories to ourselves. People will turn away from us. They'll misjudge us or they'll blame us, and none of that is true. So thank you for calling in and speaking. Now, all that said, I'm sorry that I don't know specific Catholic resources for the wound that you suffered. There are certainly groups and support groups and retreats around for women from who have survived your kind of family situation, but I'm sorry I can't refer you to specific Catholic resources for this. I really just don't know of those, and I don't know of any particular religious denomination that is only focusing on that wound for spouses. So if you want to call my office, I'll help you search in your region. Can I give my phone number?
Sure, Dr. Ed.
Yep.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so my office phone number is Soldier's Heart. Our national office is in Troy, New York. The number is 518-274-0501. 518-274-0501. Now, I am well networked with expert trauma therapists all over the country. So if you call my office or anybody out there calls, we can help you find a good referral in your part of the country for healing trauma. And I'm sorry, Debbie, that's the best I can do right now.
Right. Debbie, were you able to get that number?
Yes, I was. And in fact, that's pretty good because that Troy is probably only maybe 2 hours away from me, where I am in Pennsylvania. So,
oh wow, okay,
that's great to know.
And my organization does give intensive healing workshops for trauma survivors, and we do have a special program for women survivors of violent trauma. So please call us up, and we can help you with that and get you support through. Not only for Catholic survivors, but for all survivors, but we can help to get you support through that network, too.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Ed. I appreciate your help.
You're very welcome, Debbie. Bless you.
Debbie, thank you so much for calling. You're such a strong, strong lady, and prayers are around you. Please know that. Take Two Family is praying round the clock, so please know we have your back in prayer. I'm going to repeat the number one more time just to make sure you all got it. It's correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Ed, 518-274-0501. And that's how they can reach you, and you can help research some things for people. Real quickly, before we went to the break, there was, I believe it was Mike from Denver, Colorado, and he had dropped off, but he was the first call in, and his comment was, and it's very interesting, and maybe it tails off of what Debbie had to say, Dr. Ed, that something to the effect of that there's a lot of counseling right now, but it's not really, the culture and the counseling is not really supportive of helping people with PTSD. Is there a certain central network that people can go to for those kinds of help, for therapy, where they don't have to kind of scatter around and try to hit or miss a counselor and say, do you know about this? Do you not know? And trial and error?
Okay, well, let's thank Mike for his call and his warning, because he's absolutely right. Now, lots and lots of therapists work with trauma survivors, and military and civilian trauma survivors have very many similarities, and the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder is the same. But there are significant differences, of course, in the military and the civilian experiences. Now, that being said, there are many good therapists around, and lots of people trying to do good. However, the mainstream, this is really important, so we need to look together closely at it. The mainstream interpretations of PTSD today are that it is primarily changes in our neuropsychology, our brain chemistry, and there's much emphasis in the trauma field about teaching people how their brains work, teaching them how our brains change as a result of trauma, which they do, and then learning how to manage your reactions differently. So what is called cognitive behavioral therapy, teaching people what they think and how they translate that into actions, and managing your trauma and stress symptoms that way, is the popular form of therapy, usually very, very commonly supported by lots of medications. So cognitive behavioral therapy plus medication is the most common form of trauma treatment, and our Veterans Administration hospitals use this form as their, not exclusively, but it's their major and approved form of therapy. And what we know is it doesn't bring healing. It helps people adjust to and manage their symptoms, but it teaches that PTSD is a lifelong chronic condition and the best you can do is learn to live with it and manage the symptoms. And I want to urge everybody to be very careful with that interpretation and actually don't believe it. It is very possible to heal from PTSD. Sometimes, as you shared, Debbie, and we've heard from others, sometimes the trauma is acute and shorter lasting. Sometimes it lasts, like in your case, as long as we're in the fight or flight mode because we're being threatened. So as long as that court case was going on, it was going to keep you in that condition, and you couldn't recover until afterwards. Sometimes, and tragically, when we don't get the right kind of healing, trauma affects our spirits, our hearts, our bodies, our psyches so deeply and causes such profound changes that it can become chronic, and we can live with it for years, decades, even our entire lives. Many people now that the World War II generation is very elderly and dying off, many people are saying, oh, for the first time, I understand my father had PTSD from his service during World War II, but I never knew it and we were never talking about it, and only now that he's already gone or he's very elderly do I understand and can I forgive him.
Dr. Tick, hold that thought just for one quick second here. We're going to take that hard break. And when we come back, we've got a lot more calls. This is a fascinating conversation about post-traumatic stress disorder with Dr. Edward Tick, 38 years as psychotherapist. Here's our number if you'd like to join us, 800-585-9396.
EWTN is now on Twitter. Get short, timely messages from EWTN on your computer or cell phone. It's easy to stay up to date on a wide variety of topics. Pro-life news, Vatican announcements, catechesis, apologetics, the latest EWTN programming, and more. You can link to EWTN on Twitter from our homepage or go to twitter.com/EWTN. At work, at home, at school, and on the road. Stay connected to your world with EWTN's Twitter page.
60 Seconds with Father Mitch Pacwa.
Jesus said in John 15, chapter 16, to his disciples, "You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you." That your fruit should abide. He chose us to have abiding fruit. Now, think about that. If you make a lot of money, is that going to be abiding fruit? No. You won't even take it with you. Now, the Pharaohs tried that. But what happened? The grave robbers got it. And if you take all your treasure with you, other grave robbers will get it too. You know, that's why I always like to point out, there's not a trailer hitch on the hearses. There's not a luggage rack in a hearse.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
I invite people to tune in to Women of Grace Live if they want to be encouraged, if they want to be instructed, if they want to be inspired. These opportunities present themselves not only through what we have to share on the air, but through the many calls that come in through our listeners. I am always amazed at how my own faith is edified through what our listeners share with us. I'm Janet Benkovic, inviting you to join me weekday mornings at 11 Eastern for Women of Grace on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Thanks for being with us today on Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Dr. Edward Tick is with us. He is Executive Director and co-founder of Soldier's Heart, and they work primarily with veterans coming back from combat and other military experiences. But we're, of course, talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and how it really can impact virtually anybody. In fact, it might be surprising that to find out that we are perhaps struggling with that and we didn't realize that. So we're going to go back to your phones right now. Don in Grants Pass, Oregon. He is listening to EWTN radio in that beautiful southern Oregon area. Don, welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and our guest, Dr. Edward Tick. Hi, Don.
Hey, Don. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for the call, Don. What's your take or your question or comment?
I don't really have a question. I was going to offer a bit of insight. You know, I have PTSD from my Marine Corps service. I am a combat veteran, and my wife is also a Marine Corps veteran with PTSD, but not from her combat service. It is truly a difficult condition to navigate, especially for veterans returning home, because we can get lost in kind of the sea of transition, going from military life to civilian life. And the Veterans Administration sometimes can be very difficult to find, good treatment and even alternatives for your conditions. PTSD is something that can affect your peers and your family in a way that causes like a secondary PTSD within your children, your wife, your close related loved ones. And it's something that the whole family has to tackle together. And, as a community, we've come together for the veterans with outreach programs and support programs, and it's really taking a great stance on it, and it's having a lot of positive effect. It's something that everybody has to get involved with. If there's someone struggling with PTSD, they're not a bad person. They're just going through one of the most difficult times in their life, most likely not understanding what they're feeling. And yes, it does boil down to triggers. I'm someone who is not on any medicine for my PTSD. I have 70% PTSD through the VA, and that's kind of a high rating. So the fact that I'm not on medicine is truly a miracle, and it's about knowing your triggers. And most veterans with PTSD or people with PTSD, they try to avoid crowds because crowds can trigger them easily. We're so hypersensitive, and them being triggered can really cause the people around them to think that they're a dangerous person, when in reality, they're just in crisis and they're emotional and they're hurt. And it's all of our jobs to help them, as children of Christ, as citizens of this nation and this world. These are our brothers, and they truly have laid down their lives and livelihoods in defense of this nation. And it's time for us to stand up and take a big stance on it. As far as the VA goes and the alternatives and the treatments they offer, you're right, there is no cure, but there is a way to manage your symptoms without medicine that is effective. And a major thing that we have up in the White City VA is from the Yakima Native Americans. They have a warrior society for returning veterans, and we are all allowed to go involve ourselves in talking circles, sweat lodges. It cleanses our body from a lot of the contaminants that we've been around, and it truly heals our spirit just by connecting with people of the same magnitude and the same problems. So,
well, Don, I want to let Dr. Ed Tick give you his thoughts, because you are actually sharing so much of what I believe is going to resonate very deeply in his heart. Dr. Tick, your thoughts on what Don is sharing?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Don, and welcome home to you and to your wife. And I want to put Don on for the rest of the show. He's great. And really, everything that he's shared is important and accurate, and I want to say a few things in response. I know the White City VA program. I've worked with some vets who have been through that. It is excellent. It's superior. It's very rare in our country because it's a long-term residential program that gives our veterans everything they need for as long as they need in a safe, caring environment with other vets. That's actually a model for what all returning vets need. So Don rightly says that we are in terrible distress all the time, and that secondary PTSD spreads through the family and the community, and that's absolutely on target. So whenever there's PTSD in a family, in a relationship, there are going to be traumatic symptoms that spread through the family. Imagine if one person in the family wakes up screaming from nightmares or dives under the table from loud noises. Of course, the spouse and the children and the entire family see that and experience that, and they're scared and confused, and it traumatizes them as well. So Don's absolutely right that the entire family is affected. He's also right that we need to organize our communities. One of the ways let me share this. There are 3 different ways I translate this acronym PTSD. This diagnosis, the name for the diagnosis was only created in 1980. But, as we said, it's as old as the Bible, and we know of more than 80 different names through the centuries that it's had. Well, PTSD is the modern scientific name. We could also call it post-traumatic soul distress. It's soul distress because every aspect of our being is affected and changed. Our minds, our bodies, our hearts, our spirits, what we think, what we believe, our aesthetics, the way we love, the way we relate to people. All that changes. All that comes from the soul. In addition to soul distress, it's also post-traumatic social disorder. It's social disorder because survivors and the general public have become alienated, or the military and our civilians have become alienated. When society does not know how to respond, as we said about our Vietnam veterans, as Don just shared, when people don't know what to do, then homecoming is traumatizing. And our survivors, veterans or others, feel confused and alienated and locked out, rather than, as Don is saying, welcomed home, welcomed in, embraced, and invited to tell their stories to a caring public. So it's both a soul distress and social disorder, and we need spiritual development and social development for its healing. So we do need to be on a spiritual path, as well as in deep, ongoing therapeutic modalities, and there are many different kinds, and many of them are good for PTSD. And finally, Don said, and he models this to us, you can learn your triggers, you can learn who you have become now, you can get off medications, you can learn to sleep again, the nightmares can go away. I've worked with countless veterans who have healed from their PTSD, and non-veterans. So there's very much hope if we fully understand the holistic and spiritual nature of the wound, and we join together as people are in Oregon, as Don just shared, creating a supportive, caring community where there's lots of survivors together, so they're not alone and realize that their wounding is normal, and there are lots of caring civilians together helping them re-enter the community and shaping the community to give survivors everything they need. When we do that, healing is very possible, and there's great hope.
Don, you hit a home run with your call, and so we want to thank you for that. Any just real quick follow-up, real quick, because the phone lines are jammed. We're going to try to get to everybody and respect their calls. So, Don, any quick follow-up? And by the way, thank you for your military service, and please thank your wife as well from all of us here.
Thank you very much. The doctor that's on the show right now, he hit the nail right on the head, and it starts with the spirit, and you guys are doing great. Thank you for all that you're doing for the veterans today.
Thank you, Don. God bless you.
You're the heroes, Don. We thank you for your service and your wife as well.
Thank you. God bless you all, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Don. You too. And a blessed Independence Day weekend coming up, Don, which you and your wife and all of our military have helped to preserve for us. All right, those of you on the line, please, we are going to try to get to all of you. We just want to help in any way that we can. Minnie is in Houston, Texas, listening on the EWTN app. Minnie, welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie, and our guest, Dr. Edward Tick. Hi, Minnie. Welcome to the program.
Hi.
Hi, Minnie.
What I wanted to say is that the other lady that called, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you perfectly, Minnie, and that's Debbie who called. Go ahead. Yes. I know what. Go ahead.
And she had said that if there were any resources from spousal abuse, and I wanted to say that I recently went to a retreat that was actually for Project Rachel, which is more like for abortion, people that have had abortions. But when they have those retreats, it includes all kinds of healing, no matter what kind of abuse or situations the person might have had.
Well, that's good. That's wonderful. Dr. Tick, do you know anything about that?
Well,
Project
I don't know specifically the program that Minnie is addressing, but in general, there are many programs, my organization, Soldier's Heart, and other organizations that do run intensive healing retreats. And it's very valuable, especially for trauma survivors, to go on retreat, as Minnie is suggesting, because we get out of the everyday world that causes us constant daily worry and stress. In fact, we might say that every one of us is traumatized every day when we read the morning newspaper, because there's so much violence in the world, and we're also insecure and threatened. So withdrawing from the world that is wounding and threatening for a little while, being in retreat with facilitators you trust and with other survivors, sharing stories, comparing notes, helping each other heal, helping each other feel safe and loved and respected, and knowing that we're safe in a group, in a crowd, rather than that we're threatened and might be violated again, is really critical. So I urge everybody to look for good retreats that you can trust and believe in, and do consider using it as a major healing modality.
Thank you, Minnie. We appreciate so much for you calling, and this is what we love about Take Two listeners. We're always willing to help one another, and you jumped in right away and called in, Minnie, to help out Debbie, who called in from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I hope she's still listening so she could hear your input on this. So thanks, Minnie. God bless you, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Will you do that for us?
Okay. I wanted to mention one more thing.
Okay.
One thing that we talked about in the retreat was how women are going because they had the abortions, but the men that are involved with women that have abortions, nobody's getting to them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And how they are affected, and sometimes nobody is getting to the men that that might have had the relationship with the person that had the abortion, the woman that had the abortion. And I just wanted to mention, because that could be the trauma that those men have.
Right.
Yeah, I would recommend that people go to priestsforlife.org. I know that they probably have a resource page on their website there and all kinds of very helpful links. But Minnie, you make some really some fantastic points there. And certainly abortion is something that's going to leave scars and very, very possibly bring on PTSD for people as well. So, Minnie, thank you for contributing that to the program. We appreciate it. Kathy, you'll be right after Dawn. Dawn is in Latham. I hope I said that right. Latham, New York, listening to EWTN.com. Dawn, welcome to Take Two with Jerry and Debbie and Dr. Edward Tick. Hi, Dawn.
Hi. My daughter is 20, and she's away at school now, about 14 hours away. And 3.5 years ago, she was involved in a highly publicized fatal car accident that critically injured her and killed her boyfriend and best friend, and they were all 17 at the time. She has been diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, and her therapists have recommended that she not be in the area where she grew up and where the accident happened because she goes backwards in her progress. And my question is, how do we help her when she does come back into the area? Like, she's going to be coming home in a month for a little while. And how do we help her?
Okay.
Dr. Tick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Dawn, thank you for sharing. And yes, you're also bringing up another very important aspect of PTSD, and that is how do we cope and help together when one of our family members has it. So this is, and as we said earlier, when there's trauma in the family, everybody's impacted. So your question is very important. Also, Don, we're neighbors. I'm in Troy and you're in Latham, so you can call my office and we can talk about getting help and support for your daughter when she's home. So please consider that. Now, how you can help your daughter. Now, I don't do radio. None of us should do radiotherapy, and I also have great respect for my colleagues, and I don't want to contradict what other people are saying to help you. And at the same time, the therapist is correct that if your daughter stayed in our home community where the accident happened, that she would be re-triggered. That's not a bad thing. It's an inevitable thing. What's good or bad is how we handle it when it's re-triggered. So in working with veterans, I lead healing journeys back to Vietnam every single year. I've been back 15 times. And I take veterans who fought there to the battlefields where they fought. And I also do this stateside. I've taken accident victims to the places of their car accidents. I've taken sexual abuse and rape survivors to where to the places that these things happened. The value there is that you can achieve a very intense emotional release if you feel safe enough and you have people who care to go where it happened and release all of the emotion that's stuck in your heart and your body is really critical. Now, we usually avoid triggers because we're afraid of the intense emotion we have. But if I've been nearly killed or sexually abused, I have very intense feelings that got locked up in my body, and I need to relieve them. So those feelings are there, and they're going to be triggered sometimes by unexpected events. They can be triggered by going back for visits to where an event happened. And in fact, they should be triggered in therapy so we can release them and share them safely without them causing psychological breakdown for us. So your family could be most supportive when your daughter comes home from school by understanding that she's really vulnerable, giving her lots of patience and compassion, not taking things personally if she is emotionally reactive, not reacting to her reactions, but staying really calm and cool and knowing that it's not personal, making sure she gets the right kind of help and support, whether that's through counseling or support groups, and take this very slowly and carefully, but maybe if the family feels safe enough and she's willing and you have somebody help, then maybe visiting the sites where the damage occurred and supporting her while she does whatever she needs to. Yells, screams, cries for a while, gets the poison emotions out of her system, could potentially, if you're careful, be really helpful and liberating rather than re-traumatizing.
Dawn, does that bring you some peace?
Yes, it does. And the one thing I've never heard is that the cognitive behavior therapy and medications didn't heal, because obviously she's had that kind of therapy for the last 3 years. And is there any other way that healing does happen other than the retreats?
Oh, yes. And healing can even happen spontaneously, in the family or with your own therapist. It doesn't have to be in retreats. But there is a road map for healing and homecoming for trauma survivors. And I've been working for decades to lay this map out. Now, I have several books published on this subject, and most of them are military-specific. My next book is going to be on general trauma. However, lots of trauma survivors have found my books useful, even if they're not in the military, and they really do very specifically and carefully outline the steps for homecoming and healing.
Okay.
So my books are, I have 6 books out, but 2 of them that are relevant for you and for all trauma survivors. One is called War and the Soul, and it has a complete portrait of the inner world of a trauma survivor, what they're experiencing. So your daughter could read it, the family could read it, so everybody understands what she's going through, what it's like to be inside her. And the other book is called Warrior's Return, and it maps out all of the specific steps we need to heal trauma. And that includes isolation and tending by community and loved ones, embracing and accepting in a deep, soulful way that the trauma happened, and we can't change it and go backwards. We have to live with it and change our identities. Achieving purification and cleansing, and that can be through religious ceremony and other means. Telling our story to family, to therapists, to other survivors, eventually to the whole community. So the story isn't supercharged anymore, but we can tell it without exploding, but we learn to just carry it as part of our life story.
Mm-hmm.
And
Dawn,
then,
sorry, go ahead.
And there are 2 more steps. One is restitution, which is the community helping the survivor do what they need for healing, and the survivor taking positive action in the world to stop these things from happening again somehow. So we're making the world a better place. And when we take all these steps, and counselors, helpers, family members can learn the steps and guide them, then we take these steps. There really is a roadmap for a healing journey from PTSD. And as I said, I've been working in this field for almost 40 years and have worked with a lot of people who have walked this roadmap home, and they've healed their PTSD, not just adjusted to it, but no more meds, no more nightmares, sleeping like babies, with good relationships. It's difficult, but it's very possible, and in fact enriches our spirits on the journey.
Well, we can pray for that. That is awesome, Dr. Tick. Dawn, we hope that helps, and please know that we'll be praying for your daughter and for your entire family. Thank you so much for the call today. We only have a few minutes, just a couple minutes till the end of the show, but we wanted to get to Kathy really quickly in Aurora, Colorado, listening to EWTN Radio on Denver Catholic Radio. Kathy, our apologies. We only have a couple minutes, but we promised to get you in, and we got you in, so please go ahead.
Yes, I'm a Vietnam-era veteran who was raped by one of my instructors going through tech school, and so often women with PTSD who suffer from military sexual trauma have been ignored. They have been discharged from the military with personality disorders rather than PTSD, and they are re-traumatized by when they report it, being not believed, and others retaliation by their commanders. Also, when you get to the VA, some women have had to fight for 30 years just to get their PTSD recognized by the VA.
Yeah, and Dr. Tick, we got about 90 seconds. Apologize for the short time frame here, but as Debbie said, we wanted to help Kathy out. So
yes,
any thoughts for Kathy?
Thank you for calling, Kathy, and thank you for hanging in there. And our audience needs to know that military sexual trauma is epidemic in our military. About a third of our women serving and a quarter of our men serving are all experiencing it. And our caller is also correct that command often shuts it down and punishes the person reporting rather than stops it. So it's a major problem. It doesn't exist in all the militaries of the world, so there's something going wrong in ours, in the moral environment of our military that's causing so many troops to break down this way. And it is severely traumatizing, can even be worse than combat PTSD, because your own brothers and sisters did it to you, and your lives are dependent on each other. All that said, it is another source of PTSD that needs a lot of attention and healing, and even more than some other because our own people did it to us. So bless you for calling and for serving. Thank you, and for calling our attention to this. And all public needs to be aware of military sexual trauma, how bad it is, and yet there's hope there also.
Yeah, Kathy, thank you. Sorry about the rush there, Kathy, but we did want to help you out there, and we were just up against the clock every day on this program. But Dr. Edward Tick, thank you so much. The word that comes to my mind, and I'm sure Debbie will wholeheartedly echo this, Doctor, is hope. And I pray that we have, with your expert assistance, Doctor, I pray that we have been able to lend some hope to our listeners today.
Oh, amen to that. We all know that hope is an absolutely essential ingredient. We remember, written over the gates to hell, where abandon all hope, ye who enter here. When we restore hope, we open those gates, and our survivors can come out of that hell they're stuck in, and we can all heal and grow together.
Amen to
bless
that.
you both.
Dr. Tick, would you consider being on again for a part 2 to this, maybe to expand a little and take some more calls about different versions of PTSD? I shared one, but maybe you would be willing to do that. Come on for part 2.
Sure, I'd be honored to.
Oh, thank you so much. Well,
yeah,
you
and
can
Doctor, please. I'll give your website real quick. We got the music playing here. The show is coming to a close. soldiersheart.net. Is that? Did I get that correct, Dr.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. www.soldiersheart.net is where you can get a hold of Dr. Tick and his fine team. And again, they have a phone number there you can call and get some help. Debbie, an amazing show. Our listeners just blow me away every day. And thank God they're there, because that's why we're here.
Absolutely. And you can go to take2show.com, take2show.com. You can also link to the Jerry and Debbie website. Put your prayer intentions on the prayer wall. We want to pray for you. Tomorrow's about excommunication in the Catholic Church. We got Dr. Carol Houghton with us. It's going to be an exciting show, but until then, we wish you a beautiful and blessed day. See you tomorrow.